What's up, guys? Jesse DeRozier with Hydrilla Gorilla Guide Service here on Lake Guntersville. This is week number 9, I think, of my new series entitled What's on the Deck. This week we had a phenomenal week here on Lake Guntersville. The fish are feeding up extremely heavy. The water temperature has dropped down to about 47 degrees, and with it getting colder, the bait balls are tightening up, the fish are underneath them and feeding heavily, and it has made fishing an absolute blast. My clients had a great week this week. So much so we had 2 7-pounders now since last week. I think it was Friday last week. We ended up with a 7, and then this Friday ended up with another 7-pounder. So the giants are feeding really heavy right now. We had a 27.17 pound bag today, and that was caught by myself and a 14-year-old young man. His father had some boat issues. They had went out with me earlier in the week, and their goal in coming here was for him to catch his PB, which was right at 5 pounds. He broke that numerous times this week, so they went out with me their original day, and then once their boat tore up on them, they ended up going out with me 2 more days, and one of those was today. And just today he ended up breaking his PB twice or 3 times, but his very last cast, he caught a 7.12 pound largemouth. So the big fish are chewing. They're eating up really heavy right now, trying to fatten up for winter. Their bellies are engorged. I mean, they are chewing right now. That said, let's get into what we did this week. We did have a little bit of changes on our lineup. Last week, we did quite a bit of rattle trap and shallow water. This week we did 1 solid day that we had, and we attempted one other day, which was today, and we tried it for an hour and it wasn't panning out today, so we abandoned that and went back to our Midwater column fish, changed locations, and finished out our day strong. So we'll start with that. The shallow water fish that I've been on are on shallow grass flats, pockets, that type of situation, 4 to 6 foot of water, and thick hydrilla milfoil or coontail grasses. Those fish have been getting caught on a old school Bill Lewis rattle trap, and I mentioned it last week that I had thrown an Excalibur, a TN70, and the Bill Lewis outproduced them all. And that was again this week, the same results. Bill Lewis was the key bait in the shallow flats. I did not throw a chatterbait or the producer underspin this week. With the wind that we had, I could have thrown the chatterbait, but the trap was working so well I didn't want to put it down. The underspin would have been just a little bit too light to throw in the 20 plus mile an hour winds that we had, so I ended up not being able to throw that one this week. But keep those in mind, because if the weather conditions are right and you've got, a 5 to 10 mile an hour wind, those baits will definitely come into play. My river channel fish that I've been fishing at 6 to 10 foot of water, those fish I'm still chasing with the same lures as last week. That being a DT6. And that I'm throwing where the grass is thicker and a little bit shallower. So those clumps of hydrilla, milfoil, coontail, sago, that's where we're throwing that. When we get to the areas that have the eelgrass and the grass is not up off the bottom like the other grasses, I'm going with the DT10. If you notice, again, bright colors. The wintertime, I like what we call shock colors. Your reds, chartreuses, purples, oranges, bright, bold colors. Obviously, shad patterns work as well, because the majority of the other baits that we're throwing are shad patterns. But with crankbaits, I do like shock colors. Out on the ledges, you can throw this, as well as in those kind of mid-water depths or really deep depths, is going to be a jerkbait. Mega Bass Vision 110 plus 1 or the Berkeley Stunna 112 plus 1. Both will work very well. in this situation, but basically if you're on a river channel ledge and you've got that grass down there, you want to be coming right above the grass. So in a shallow 6-foot grass, run a regular bill. If you're on the deep water grass, the eel grass, it's 9-10 foot off the bottom, down. The deeper jerk bait, getting it down to where you're getting a couple feet above that grass. Those would be my choices for that situation. Outside of that, that is primarily what I would do on those ledges, unless you're going deep ledges, in which case an Alabama rig could come into play. Deep ledges as well would be some of these bottom bouncing baits. So the Dirty Jigs, 3/8 ounce, little 2.8 Kitech. That little guppy head is phenomenal. But again, running this thing on the bottom, if you notice the nose is worn the paint off of it. That used to be white. Throw this out there, get it to the bottom, and crawl it across the bottom. If you can't slow yourself down by reeling and literally making one handle turn about every 7 to 8 seconds, then drag it and literally force yourself to count the inches as you're moving it. It is imperative that that bait is moving extremely, extremely slow. You want to be feeling every tick and piece of gravel or shell that's on the bottom. The other bottom baits that I've been throwing, I don't have one tied up today. I had to cut it off to use one of the rods for another technique, but the old school jigging spoon. Lead slab bait, basically. Throw it out there. If there's a school of bait that's high in the water column, you can wait until it flutters through and pop it back up into the bait ball. Or if there's fish all the way down on the bottom, you can let it go to the bottom, hop it up about 3 feet, and let it fall back. Now the jigging spoon, I hop higher than I do these next two baits that we're going to discuss. And the reason why is because it's so heavy, it falls faster, and you need to give those fish a little bit more time to react to it. So the jigging spoon, I do hop about 3 feet up off the bottom. The next bait that I hop up off the bottom, or not really hop, but lift off the bottom, I should say, is the Little George or a Daracoop or any type of tail spinner. Throw it out there, let it go to the bottom. And again, this one doesn't matter how deep the water is. I'd say 8 foot or deeper, it will work. Throw it out there, let it go to the bottom, and you're going to lift your rod about 1 foot to 1.5 foot and reel up your slack. As you're reeling it down, pay attention, because that's usually when that bite's going to happen, is on that fall as it's fluttering back down. The next lift, you may pull up and it just be there, heavy with a fish. So be prepared to pull. You don't always feel that tick when it's dropping. The next bait is a blade bait. And this bait wobbles side to side. If you think of a rattle trap, how it wobbles side to side, this does the same thing, except you're not looking to run this through the water column like you do a trap. You're going to throw it out there just like you do the tail spinner, let it go to the bottom. You're going to lift it. I usually lift that until I feel that blade thump about 4 times, and that'll happen within about 1 foot of your lift. So very short little lifts. Reel up your slack as you drop it back to the bait to lift again. Excuse me. Again, they're going to hit it on the drop. So be prepared on your next lift, or if you feel a light tick as you're reeling up your slack, go ahead and hit it, because that fish is probably there. The last bottom bouncing bait this week, went ahead and added it in. We finally are getting fish setting up in the treetops, laydowns, things like that. If you've got laydowns in deeper water and you've got live scope around those trees, you might see some crappie, but you might see some bass in there as well. But taking a ball head jig, a little mini jig, that is a beaver style bait, so it has very little action. You don't want a lot of kicking or flapping or anything like that this time of year. Black and blue is a great wintertime color. Black and purple, brown and purple, anything like that. Great winter colors. But throwing it out there and working it slowly in and around these trees can get you some really big bites. There's a lot of fish that are now moved into that structure and can be caught that way. So if you're a jig fisherman, now's the time to break that thing out. Those winter crawfish are small crawfish. The adults have went in and hibernated since the water's gotten below 52 degrees, and they will not come back out until our water temperatures in the spring come back up above 52 and remain there for a little while. Then they'll come out and be ready for their spawn and for their next molt. They usually only molt twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. Your small crawfish are continually growing. They stay out during the season, and they molt every single month on the full moon. So if you're going to throw a jig, a great time is around the full moon, because their eyes fog over as their shells are releasing from their body, and they're going to kick themselves out of that old shell. They can't see through that hazed over lens that they've released from, and it's an easy meal for the bass that during that time of the month. So keep that in mind if you are a jig fisherman. Your bites will probably be the best around the full moon on a jig. Not that they'll only be then, but they'll be better then. So the midwater column baits that I've been fishing, the bait ball fish that I've been after, we've been attacking those with multiple techniques, one of which is a scrounger style. So the Jig Head minnow that we'll also be talking about, the whole point of that bait is to have a rolling action. It has a straight tail, and the bait rolls side to side. Well, that's what a scrounger does. So the blade on that will save you from having to sit there and constantly shake, shake, shake the entire day. You can throw it out and just do a straight retrieve if you are not looking to set out there and be constantly shaking like you're having a spasm of some sort. This absolutely will get you bit, but I will say the other one will get you more bites. So if you don't want to do it, this is an option to get bites. Or if you're just getting into that style of fishing and haven't learned to do that yet, that is something that you could do in place of it. As we had mentioned, the little 2.8 Kitech. Underneath those schools, you'll always have some bass that are laid on the bottom that are not actively engaged in feeding up on that school. Those fish are the ones that I'm going to be attacking with the blade bait, the spoon, the jigging spoon, the 2.8. Those fish are going to stay down. The ones that are up in the water column, that are looking up and moving around, those you want to be taking the bait and come between the fish, the bass, and the shad. So if you've got shad up in the water column and you've got fish schooling underneath, the options of baits that you're going to attack that with is going to be an A-rig, the deep jerk bait, an underspin. That underspin, you can work it up in the water column or you can work it down on the bottom. If you notice the nose on that bait as well, the paint has been worn off. So the fish that are down on the bottom, you can drag that on the bottom just like the 2.8, and with that blade down there kicking around, it's not really spinning, but it will kick around underneath that bait a little bit as you're kind of moving it along the bottom, and it'll create a little bit of flash and a little bit of noise, and it can get you a few extra bites. Some days they don't want it at all. The blade's just too much, in which case the 2.8 does better. So you have to figure that out on a day-to-day basis. The last bait this week is the Jig Head minnow. So the one that we've been throwing this week is the freeloader from Crush City, and that is a ducket sway head, 3/16 ounce, and you will go through quite a bit of these baits if you don't take a little bit of precaution. The sway head has 2 wire keepers run down the hook shank. One turns up, one turns down. Well, the pieces that turn up and down, to me, they're a little too long. So much so that they will tear your bait as you're putting it on the hook. So take a pair of dikes, cut them in half. So not halfway up the wire, but where the turn is, where the wire goes down the hook and turns up. That piece that turns up, cut it in half. The piece that turns down, cut it in half. So you're going to nip off literally maybe a 32nd of an inch, not much. What that will do is allow for it to go into the bait without tearing the bait as bad. The second thing that you want to do is take those wires and kind of pinch them together a little bit with your finger to where they kind of fold in and around the hook. What that will do is, again, instead of the wires sticking out like this, it's going to bring them in a little bit. So again, you're making a smaller hole through the nose of your bait. When you slide it up on there, find the spot where you need to come out, go ahead and get it there, and just before you go into the body of that bait, you need to take that head and turn it sideways and push it on and then turn it back straight. What that will do is, instead of this being, say, your bait, instead of it cutting a hole in line with where those keepers are going to be, by turning that head, it cuts the hole through the plastic going in, and then you turn those keepers up, and now it's got material it can grab against. So that will make a big difference in how long that is going to stay on that hook. These baits are not that cheap. When you're talking, you catch one fish and it tears up, there's 6 in a pack, you got 6 fish, and now you've went through $7 worth of plastic. So that's 2 things that I do. Cut the barb, or the bait keeper, twist the bait as you're pushing it on, twist it back straight. The third thing, and probably the most beneficial, is to take some glue. That is Avid Anglers Solutions. They make a fishing glue that is very liquid, so it doesn't gel up and get all clumpy and everything else. If you take this one bottle, that'll probably last you 6 months, a year, 2 years, depending on how much glue that you actually use. But this stuff is absolutely phenomenal. It gives you time to work with the bait. So what I mean by that is, you take that bait and pull that plastic back just a hair, put a dot of glue, right? You got time to set it down. You can take the bait and massage it around and spread that little dot of glue now all the way around the entire surface of that lead. Get it in position, push the plastic up, and hold it for 30 seconds. Hold that for 30 seconds. I promise you. Let it go. It's solid. The glue will not release. Your plastic will tear away from the glue before the glue releases. So if it pops loose after fighting a fish, look, you'll see that there's plastic actually stuck in the glue. All you've got to do, put another drop, push it back up there, and it will glue to itself. That Avid Angler glue is much better than super glue. The super glue that I've used in the past, if it gets laid over, it's done. It clogs up in the tube. You try running something through it, and that little piece that hardened up inside the tube gets knocked down, then it slides back up into the tube as soon as you try to use it. It's extremely frustrating. That stuff's $7. Super glue's $4.50 to $5. But you'll get 20 times more use out of this than you will a bottle of super glue. So it's going to pay for itself in the long run. That's pretty much it, guys, other than one other thing that I wanted to hit, and that is Thump Gel. Today, we absolutely put it to the test. We were working with a 14-year-old. As I mentioned earlier, we went out, we were throwing the baits, and we were literally watching the fish swim up to our bait like it was fixing to smoke it, and it would turn off. Swim up to our bait and turn off. I told him, I said, all right. I said, now, let's add the Thump Gel. We put it on there, pushed it up into the little grooves of the bait. It's got a nice little belly slit. You put some up in there. Put it on there. As soon as we fired out, my very first cast, it hit the water. I made about 4 turns of the handle, and one shoots up off the bottom and smoked my bait. I was like, okay, well, he's pretty good distance from it, so would that have really made a difference? Reel it up, get that one off, fire back out there. 2-3 casts later, the same group of fish that were swimming up to the bait, nosing up to it and then turning off. They nosed up to it, and then one, like there was 3 or 4, one from the back just blows right past the other 3 and smokes the bait. It's like, well, doggone. Okay, well, I like this. This young kid put on a clinic. I made sure I kept that on his bait all day, and we could tell, absolutely tell, when this stuff got wore off. How? Because the fish stopped biting and started following. They went back to the way it was when it didn't have the Thump Gel on it. They would run up to it, nose up to it, and turn off. As soon as I'd see that, I'd say, all right, let's pull it back out and add a little bit more. Instantly, it was like, get bit again. His last fish of the day, 712. Thump Gel, yeah, it works. Absolutely, guys. I know it's a little tube. The stuff does go a long way. So you can take a dot smaller than the size of a pea, and you can cover a bait from one end to the other if you wanted to. So, I mean, you don't even need that much. Literally a small dab will go an absolute long ways. The different colors and names that you see out there for the product is more for color options, not scent. There's one scent currently. He is in production of another scent, but that is still yet to be released. But pair your colors to the type of lure that you're throwing. If you notice, this is the cranking gel, pairs up nicely with, that is the electric shad, and that flake goes on there beautifully. Absolute great match. If you're throwing a green pumpkin worm, he's got green. If you're throwing something you want a hint of chartreuse, he's got the chartreuse juice. So pair it up with what you're throwing. If you don't have the right color, I honestly don't think it's going to matter. It's the scent, I promise you, that they're really after. The glitter, I definitely think makes a difference in adding a little bit of flash. The color can just accentuate your bait. Like if you're throwing something that's shad color and you want a little chartreuse kind of added to it, it will add a little hue for you. But that's basically it for this week, guys. I hope that this information helps you out this week. I know we've got a major cold front coming, and that's going to change things up substantially. Now, that said, next week I probably won't put a post out. Just FYI. The reason why is I am having my transmission and my rear end in my pickup truck replaced due to towing my boat up and down the mountain here every single day. So my truck's going to be in the shop all next week, and I'll be over in Georgia. So I'm probably not going to be out on the water during this massive cold front, which I'm not too sore about, to say the least. It's going to be pretty nasty. I think they're showing a couple of days where the high is 31. So not even above freezing. But that being the case, hope you guys do well this week if you do venture out there in this nasty cold front. If you don't, well, I will pick you up then the following week and let you guys know how we did and where we're going from there. Until then, guys, tight lines. Have a good night.